Hi students, today we are going to discuss the second chapter in class 10th political science, that is federalism. You would have come across the term federalism in many places. Federalism is a system of government in which the power is divided between a central authority and various constituent units of the country or various levels of the government. Which means that in a country the power is shared between the central government which rules the whole country and its various units like the state government or the local governments. Now let us understand clearly what are the constituent units and the levels of government. The constituent units of the country are the states or provinces, the union territories and the local bodies. The various levels of government are the central government, state government and the local self-government. You know that we have 28 states and 8 union territories. They are the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Dadra, Nagar Haveli, Daman and Diu, Chandigarh, Lakshadweep, Puducherry or Pondicherry, Delhi, Ladakh, Jammu and Kashmir. You know that recently some amendments were made in the constitution so as to reorganize the union territories and also to add few more to its list. You know that Ladakh and Jammu and Kashmir are added to the list of union territories recently. What are the features of federalism? There are 2 or more levels of government. I will teach you this portion in connection with the federal system we practice in India. We have in fact 3 levels of government. We have already seen central, state and local governments. The second feature, each level of government has its own jurisdiction. The constitution very clearly defines the powers of central government, state government and the local self-governments. Each level has got its own jurisdiction, which means area of power. Third, the jurisdiction is specified in the constitution, which means that the powers of each level is very clearly defined in the constitution so that no one can encroach upon the powers of each other. The fourth feature of federalism is that the fundamental provisions of the constitution cannot be unilaterally changed by one level of government alone. For example, if any amendment, any change is required in the constitution, important changes, that cannot be done by the central government alone. You know that on important amendments, both the houses of parliament have to pass it with 2/3 majority and also it has to be ratified by 50% of the state assemblies. So central government alone cannot amend the constitution, states cannot amend the constitution, but it requires the support of both the center and the state. Now we come to the next point. Courts have the power to interpret the constitution. Why is it important? There is a likelihood of having conflict between the center and state. If any such conflict happens, then the Supreme Court has to intervene and then they have to resolve the issue. So the courts have the power to interpret the constitution. Now we come to the fifth feature of federalism. The sources of revenue for each level of government are specified. Governments won't be able to function effectively and efficiently without financial resources. Without financial resources, the power of the government will be curtailed. That's why our constitution makers have very categorically and clearly defined the powers of the financial powers of the states and the central government. Now they are again mentioned and they are very categorically registered. Now we come to the next point. What are the two main objectives which the system tries to incorporate? First, to safeguard and promote the unity of the country. Particularly in the backdrop of India, when we divided power between the central government and the state, the central government has been given more powers. Our constitution is biased towards the central government. Why is it so? Why has the constitution made the central government more powerful? It is because we will be able to maintain the unity and integrity of the country. Otherwise, if the states are given too much of freedom, probably there would have been a scope for the states seceding from the country and we would have lost some of the territories. That's why central government is given more powers. At the same time, the states are given powers. Why? The constitution wants the diversity of the country to be accommodated and respected. So the states have their right to protect their culture, their traditions, their language. So federalism in India has two main objectives. One, to protect and safeguard the integrity and unity of the country, at the same time accommodate the regional differences, regional diversities. Next is the type of federations. There are two types of federations. Number one, coming together federation, and number two, holding together federation. Now, what is the difference between these two? What are the examples of coming together federation and holding together federation? First, let us understand what is meant by coming together federation. Coming together federation is a system where independent states come together by retaining their identity. They come together to make them strong. They come together with limited scope and with limited powers. For example, USA. The states in USA are almost independent, but they come together and share certain common points. What are these common points? Foreign affairs, currency, defense are some of the areas where they share their power and the central government plays its role, but otherwise the states are more or less independent. But when we come to holding together federation, a large country like India divide the power among their constituent units or their subunits. For example, India share its power with the state governments and then the local governments. So a large country, for the convenience of administration, divide the power, share the power. That is what is meant by holding together federation. The examples are India, Belgium, Spain, etc. Now we move on to the next point. What makes India a federal country? See, it is very important that we understand how federalism is practiced in our country. The first point, we have a three-tier system of government. You already know, we have discussed several times that we have a central, state and local governments. Second point, the division of power or the free list. The constitution enlists the union list, state list and concurrent list, and these lists define the powers of the central government, state governments. Now we have a third point, the residual powers. What is meant by residual powers? Children, we have to really appreciate and then honor and recognize the great vision of our freedom fighters and our constitution makers. The third aspect is residual power. Children, what is meant by residual power? Our constitution makers, while they made the constitution in 1950, visualized that certain new developments, certain new subjects would come in future. When such new development happens in future, they should be accommodated. There should be a space in our constitution to accommodate them. That's why they created a residual list. This is a list in which all these new developments, new subjects which are coming up in the future are incorporated. For example, when we made the constitution in 1950, they never anticipated or imagined that there would be something called cybercrime, e-commerce, space tourism, which are all the recent developments. All these subjects come under the residual powers or residual list. And you must remember that the power to make law on residual list lies with the central government. Next is the union territories. Boys, we have 28 states and 8 union territories. Why do we have union territories? Why are they not made part of the states? Or why are these union territories given the status of a state? They are kept as a separate entity because they have a cultural, ethnic, or some political background. For example, Pondicherry or Puducherry was a state or an area ruled by the French for a very long time. So places like Karaikal, Mahi, all are brought together. The erstwhile French areas are put together to make it a union territory so that the people living there maintain their identity. Now similarly, you look at Dadra and Haveli. Many of them are like that. Their population is less, but they have some peculiar identity to be maintained. Therefore, our constitution accommodated them, and they have been given a very separate dignity, status, identity, and the central government looks after the administration of these areas. Now my second question, why are they not made a full-fledged states? Children, they are not big enough, population-wise, financial resources-wise. Therefore, they are not given that statehood. But as years go by, when their population increases, when their financial resources increases, probably they will also get statehood. Goa was a union territory for a long time, but it was made a state. At present, out of 8 union territories, 3 of them have their legislative assemblies. Pondicherry has state assembly. Then Delhi, the national capital, has their assembly, their MLAs and their chief minister. And then Jammu and Kashmir, they have their MLAs, their assembly and their chief minister. But they are not full-fledged states. Some powers of the state are given to them. They are not full-fledged state. So that is why these union territories are not given the statehood, but in due course of time, as I said, when their population increases, when their financial resources increase, they might get the statehood. Next one is amendment to the constitution. We learned that one of the important features of federalism is that the fundamental principles of the constitution cannot be unilaterally changed by one level of government. So, if there is a change required, amendment required, it needs the support of both the central government and the state governments. I told important constitutional amendments are possible only if both the houses of parliament passed this amendment with 2/3 majority and 50% of the state assembly ratified. In present scenario, out of 28 states, at least 14 of them, 14 state assemblies have to ratify the amendment which is passed in the parliament. So that is the next point. Then role of judiciary. It is nothing but natural that when power is shared, there is a certain amount of chances of conflict, rift, difference of opinion between central government and the state government or between the state governments. It is also possible that the central government overstep their powers. They might make laws which may go against the spirit of constitution. Who will resolve these issues? That's why we have a judiciary, a very strong, independent judiciary. In case of any conflict, in case of any violation of the constitution, the judiciary will interfere and see that the system is run smoothly and properly. So that is the role of judiciary. Now we move on to the last point, financial powers of the union and the state governments. You know, a government will not be able to function very effectively if it doesn't have financial resources. It should not be too much depending on the other for finances. That's why our constitution very clearly mentioned what are the financial powers of the central government, what are the powers of the state and the local self-governments. So these 7 points make India a federal country. These 7 steps makes the federal structure of our country strong. Then we move on to the next topic. What are the 3 lists? I said that the powers of the state, center and the local self-governments are divided in the constitution. The 7th schedule of the constitution deal with the division of power. The first one is a union list. There are 97 subjects, all subjects of national importance like railways, finance, then mining, civil aviation, currency, foreign affairs, all such subjects are given to the central government, union list. The subjects on which the state government can make law are called the state list. There are 66 of them: police, prison, local governments, hospitals and dispensaries, sanitation and hygiene, etc. come under the category of state list. The third one is concurrent list. What is meant by concurrent list? Both the central government and state government can make law on that. But of course, if both the center and state make contradictory law, then the law of the central government will be valid. The third one is the concurrent list. What is meant by concurrent list? Children, on this subject both the state and center can make law. But of course, if there is a contradictory law, then the law of the central government will be valid. There are 52 subjects here. Originally there were only 47, but in 1976, by the 42nd amendment of the constitution, 5 more subjects were added to the concurrent list. So now it has got 52 subjects. Some examples of concurrent list are criminal procedures, marriage and divorce, prevention of cruelty to animals, forest, family planning, etc. Now I will show you some of the subjects which were brought into the concurrent list in 1976 by the 42nd amendment. To the 42nd amendment of the constitution in 1976, 5 subjects have been transferred to the concurrent list from the state list, which means before 76 these were under the control of the state government, but then in 76 it has been transferred to the concurrent list, whereby central government would be able to monitor and control what are these subjects. They are education, forest, weights and measures, protection of wild animals and birds, and the administration of justice. Now, very important aspect, how is federalism practiced in India? There are main 3 points. They are the linguistic states. In 1947, states were created not on the basis of language. The erstwhile provinces like Madras province, Punjab province, Bengal province, like that, the provinces were converted into states. But later it was felt that it is important to promote regional diversity, accommodate regional diversity. Therefore, there was a thought whether the states have to be rearranged on the basis of a language. Many people criticized, saying that keeping a state for Kerala only for the people who speak Malayalam, and Tamil Nadu for Tamilians, Bengal for Bengalis, Orissa for Oriya, there could be too much of love for their state, and this extreme love for their state might reduce their loyalty to the central government. But our constitution maker, our policy makers felt that it won't affect our national integrity, but it will help the state to progress faster. So linguistic states were created in 1956. Second point is the language policy. Yeah, we have no national language. Why? Hindi could have been the national language, since 40% of the population at that time spoke Hindi. But it was also a fact that 60% of the people in our country do not speak or do not understand Hindi. Therefore, our constitution makers decided that we won't have any national language. Then they decided to go for 2 official languages. All government offices will have bilingual transactions. Any order which comes from the central government should be both in Hindi and English. Hindi speaking people can understand Hindi, non-Hindi speaking people will be able to understand it by reading that thing in the English language. So we decided to have 2 official languages, Hindi and English. That's how the regional differences were accommodated into our constitution. The third one is we have 22 recognized languages. The 8th schedule of our constitution specify the recognized languages. These languages are decided on the basis of the number of people speak that language, the level of its literature, the script it follows, the achievements it made in the field of literature. Based on that, a language is given recognition. We have 22 recognized languages which are mentioned in the 8th schedule of our constitution. Next one is the state language. Each state has the power to declare their language as the state language, and it can be the language of administration in that state. And next one is flexibility in linguistic policy. See, our government decided not to be too rigid with the language. You know why? We have too much of linguistic diversity. Probably there is no country in the world which has got as many of languages spoken in India. Therefore, it is imperative that these languages are given their own due share, and the people who speak the language also should be given their due respect and share. Now we come to the last point, the center-state relations. You know, in a country like India, where the power is divided between center and state, and the central government is made more powerful than the state, there is certain amount of subordination, and there has to be a very healthy relationship between the center and state. Our federal structure will function smoothly only if the center and state function in a very harmonious way. But the center-state relation was not very healthy and not very strong before 1990. Whenever we had one single party government at the center, there were certain amount of encroachment into the affairs of the states which were ruled by other political party. For example, the Congress was in power for a long time, and wherever there were non-Congress government, there were certain amount of interferences, and that is the case with all the political parties which comes to power in Delhi. That's why after 1990 there has been a very visible change in the center-state relations. And you know what is the reason? Ever since we had a coalition government at the center, there were many of the coalition partners from various states, regional parties, state parties began to play a dominant role in central government. For example, Telugu Desam party became a part of central government. DMK, otherwise AIADMK of Tamil Nadu were part of it. The Biju Janata Dal from Orissa was part of it. National Conference was part of the central government. So when these state parties began to play their role, when they became coalition partners, these states began to get the central support, and the relationship between the center and state were so strong. And you say after 1990 we had either UPA government or we had the NDA government. UPA means United Progressive Alliance, a combination of political parties led by Indian National Congress. The other side, it is the NDA, National Democratic Alliance, again a group of political parties under the leadership of the BJP or Bharatiya Janata Party. When it comes to Kerala, we always have coalition governments, either it is UDF or LDF. So what I mean to say is that ever since coalition governments came into being at the center, the state governments or the states began to get more representation and more rights. So these are the main 3 points when we talk about how federalism is practiced in India, how is federalism get deep rooted and strengthened in our country. To summarize, we follow federalism in our country, and we have been practicing that for past so many years, and ever since 1990 the states began to play a very important role. And of course, whenever there is a rift between central government and the state government, judiciary plays a very important role, and they are also instrumental in keeping our federal system strong and vibrant. Thank you, boys.